Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you are located. This is a Vivid webinar session, and today's topic is exploring unstructured data and analytics. This topic will be presented by two speakers. We have Kate Fontanella from HP Vertica, and we have Tori Jones from Greenlight Group. And my name is Sumit Sengupta. I will be the moderator / host for the whole session. This presentation is brought to you by Vivid. We have a special interest group for big data, and that special interest group led by 5 people. Kate, one of the speakers herself, she's one of the leaders, and the others are Pramod Singh, Akshar Dave, Abdul Rafi, Doug Stone, and myself, Sumit Sengupta. So I'll give a brief introduction for myself as well as the speakers, and then we will go on to the presentation. And the format of the presentation will be such that we'll have a talk first, and then there will be a live demo. And in between, you can ask your question anytime on the chat screen. You can only ask questions by typing, and the speakers will get to them. We have a plan to answer the questions before we start the demo, and also we'll answer the questions after the demo is completed. This is a 1-hour session, and we hope to complete it by the hour. So I am the host. My name is Sumit Sengupta. I'm an enterprise architect at HP Enterprise Systems. I have over 17 years of experience, primarily administering and architecting Oracle databases. My primary interests include high availability, virtualization, and security. I've also been an architect of storage solutions and recently on big data, NoSQL, and analytic columnar databases. Like I said, I'm one of the leaders of this big data special interest groups of Vivid. And we have 2 speakers. We have Tori Jones from Greenlight Group. Tori is a principal consultant of service management there. He has spent over 14 years of his career dedicated to all aspects of IT management. He has been engaged to assist with all aspects of integration to and from HP software platform. He is a Vertica ATP certified professional, and he's been frequently engaged with customers in HP, and Greenlight is a gold level partner of Hewlett Packard. Also presenting is Kate Fontanella. Kate is a senior technical instructor of Vertica, and she's an HP employee. If you have ever taken any Vertica training or course or watched it online, you probably heard her voice. She has a passion for training and fascinating education on the technical front. She's got background and experience on Cognos, SAP, and Oracle. She spent over 10 years in the legal industry as a marketing technology manager, managing SQL-based tiering system and its team. And now she holds an MBA with a concentration in marketing and human resources from Clark University. And she recently worked on MIT building online courses for the staff and SAP and Cognos. So that's the introduction for the speakers and myself. Real quick, again, a housekeeping thing. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the Vivid website. The Q&A, like I said, you can type your question anytime you want on the type icon on this Vivid screen. And the slide deck and the webinar, again, will be available on the website. That's all about housekeeping. That's where my job ends. I'm going to hand it over to the speakers. So over to you, Tori.
Thanks, Sumit. Appreciate the introductions there and the housekeeping agenda there. So I'm going to run through the agenda real quick, then I'll hand it over to Kate. She'll run through a couple of slides. I'll chime in off and on with a couple of slides, and we'll get to a live demonstration. So real quick, just the agenda for the session. We already did introductions and the housekeeping topics. We'll talk a little bit about what is dark data, right? Because we're going to try to explore this dark data lake, if you will. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Vertica and Vertica's Flex Zone and how Vertica's Flex Zone can help you get some light into your dark data so you can start to get visibility into your data lake. that you previously have not had visibility into. We'll talk a little bit about how FlexZone works. We'll talk about the basics, what it means to materialize information that's been put into the FlexZone or Flex tables. And then we'll get to a demonstration. We'll actually show you how to load data from 2 different sources. And then we'll also, in that demonstration, show you how to start to analyze that data and how to get graphical representations of that data using common visualization tool Tableau. We'll circle back after the demo, do a quick review, follow up with any final Q&A, and then wrap it up. With that, I'll hand it over to Kate, and Kate will cover dark data.
Thanks, Tori. So the question is what is dark data? And in trying to look at a definition, I looked up a definition from Gartner, which defines dark data as the information assets organizations collect, process, and store during their regular business activity, but they generally fail to use it for other purposes like analytics or business relationships or any kind of way of monetizing it. So similar to dark matter in physics, dark data often comprises most organizations' universe of information assets, but and so therefore the organizations retain the dark data for compliance purposes. So while organizations recognize the potential and value of dark data, they find it particularly challenging to find patterns in or explore new forms of semi-structured data, such as social media, web logs, sensor data, and a lot of other things, including machine data, log files. All of these things include the dark data. So these new and rapidly growing important types of data require a lot of times a lengthy process to load it into traditional analytic platforms and data warehouses before they can deliver any value. So organizations want to be able to explore and analyze and shine light on this dark data so they can understand the potential. So do you have dark data? Probably. And today what we're going to look at is how you can find ways to load that data, query it quickly, and analyze it to help your business. Tori, go ahead. Oh, sorry, it switched. Sorry, the screen took a little while. So in this webinar, what we're going to show you is how to get the dark data you already have and use the tools called FlexZone to bring it into the Vertica database and query it right away. We will show you how you create the Flex table, then bring in the semi-structured data using one of the built-in parsers. I'm going to bring in some JSON data, which is just some social media data. Tori's going to bring in some delimited syslog network data using the delimited parser. So we are then going to show you how you can immediately start querying that data, and we'll look at the query plan from that query to see where the data is coming from. Next, we're going to show you how to materialize that data, and then later, Tori's going to show you how you can actually bring that data into Tableau. Next slide.
Okay, good overview, Kate. Appreciate that. So how does it work? How does FlexZone work? In essence, at the highest level from that 100,000-foot view looking down, you literally just toss the data in, and Vertica and Vertica's FlexZone and Flex table functionality takes care of it for you. In essence, you don't have to predefine your structure. You don't have to build a structure around it ahead of time. So you don't have to go in. You don't have to define schemas. And you don't have to define tables and exactly what they look like and data types for each and every column and all of the traditional things that you have to do. So you literally just toss the data in. Once you get the data in, you decide at a later point what is important about that data set. And that really allows you to walk through a schema discovery. So you can start to identify and start to put some level of structure around that data. Once you understand it, you can start to build upon it, and you can decide what to do with it. Do you want to leave that data in a Vertica Flex table just for the sake of discovery? Do you want to extract it perhaps, or perhaps move it into another Vertica, true traditional Vertica table so you can get all the benefits from Vertica in that capacity and reduce your Flex table usage, because there is a little overhead with Flex tables. One of the key benefits here is that you get to retain the actual SQL interface, right? So you can use traditional tools, and we'll show you how to do this again with Tableau here in a few minutes. But you'll be able to maintain and preserve your traditional functionality. So if you use a Tableau, or if you use a MicroStrategy, or if you use an SAP Business Objects, you can start to leverage those visualization mechanisms against this previously unstructured data set. So that's really kind of an overview of how it works, and we'll move on to the basics about how to actually create the stuff. So the first step literally is to create the flex table. And when you create the flex table, it's literally a very simple statement, and we'll show you again here in a minute. It's literally create flex table name. It's literally a simple SQL statement along those lines. The next thing, once you have your flex table defined, is you will copy data into it. And you copy data into it by way of a parser. And there's numerous different parsers. The two that we're going to show you today have to do with JSON data, JavaScript object notation data, and then also a CSV or a delimited file parser as well. But there's a number of other parsers that can be leveraged, and there's lots of documentation out there on those. Those are just going to be the two that we focus on today. Once you have the data in, and remember that data came in and it went through this parser, and this parser parsed the data all by itself. You didn't have to define a structure to it. You didn't have to define a regular expression to parse it in. Once you get it in, you effectively define the string columns, and that's really just to allow you to, get to that data with relative ease. And then once you have it in there and you have your strings defined, you can literally just start to query the data. And once you start to query the data, this is really where the power comes in, because previously you wouldn't have been able to execute a select statement or a SQL statement against this data. Now you have that capability. So you can start to query the data, you can start to discover the data, and you can start to look at it and determine what you want to do next. And one of the things that most folks want to do next is put some level of structure behind it, so you can start to pull out the critical data points from the data set that you loaded in. So the way that flex tables get more structure added to them, it's really a two-step process, effectively. The first step is going to be to compute the flex table keys and build a view. Now there's a Vertica defined function that does this for you, so this is literally just another SQL statement on the command line, and it basically determines the columns, what to call the columns, and builds a view for you so you can start to reference that. And then you can reference that view. You can either run selects against it directly in VSQL, which is the Vertica SQL interpreter, or you can leverage that view externally, right? And that's what we're going to see a little bit later, is leveraging that view out in Tableau so we can start to discover. And what this does is it enables organizations to push the data out, right? So an administrator loads the data into Vertica, and then you really enable the business or the end users of the data, the people who actually are curious about the data and what its capabilities are. You enable them through that visualization layer to be able to start to query the data, and they leverage this view in order to do that. Once the flex table keys and the view is defined, you materialize the data. And materializing the data is a process that abstracts data out of the raw column, if you will, and puts it out into its own column. For the actual materialization process, I'm going to hand you back to Kate, and Kate will run us through the materialization.
Thanks, Tori. So we're going to start here, and this is a flex table, and this is how the data would look if you just loaded the data initially. So as you can see, there's going to be two columns. There's going to be the identity column, and then there's going to be the raw column. And if you run a basic select query against this, the raw column would show you that there is some sort of definition in this. We're going to just call it columns A, B, C, and D. So the identity column is just kind of like an auto increment column just to identify the rows within that data. And then the raw column is the actual raw data, and all of it is held in here. So the idea is that you've got you can kind of see some structure. You can run a select query against this raw column, and then you can see what are some of the potential column names within the data. Next slide. Okay, so in the next screen, what we've decided to do is we've decided to go ahead and define some of these columns. So we're going to define or materialize columns A and C. We've done a quick select query. We've decided that what we really need to understand in more detail is what are held in columns A and C. And so we define columns A and C. And what you're going to see here is that you get the columns A and C defined within the flex table, and then that raw column stays. What goes away is the identity column, because now with columns A and C defined, flex tables now has something to hang its hat on in terms of the rows. So the identity column goes away when you do this, and you've identified columns A and C as where you're going to do some analysis, and you really set up define those columns A and C. What you do with columns A and C next is really up to you. You could continue to just query the data from the flex table. You could move columns A and C over to a specific Vertica table and then build projections and do all of the stuff you might do with a Vertica system. Or you could run it off of a view and then bring it into something like Tableau. So that's what we're really talking about. But the key is to understand that you start with this ID and then this column of all the data. Then you can define those columns like columns A and C, and then you still have all of the other data. So if you later decide that you needed to find something about column B or column D, you could still get that. It's still in there. What you want to understand is that the data might take a little longer to load if you keep it in this format. But by defining columns A and C, you're improving your query performance. So if you just search the raw column, you're still able to query the data. By defining A and C, you're improving your query performance. And then the SQL is going to stay the same post-materialization, so after this definition. And you can also run queries against some views and so forth if you use some of the helper functions that we're going to show you. So that's really what we're going to do today is we're actually going to load this. We're going to get our raw data. We're going to show it to you. Then we're going to bring it in and show you the different materialization processes.
Kate, I think it's important to mention here that this is the point where there's some level of structure around the data.
Yes.
And a decision needs to be made at this point of whether or not to, and you implied this a little bit in your comments there, a decision needs to be made whether or not to leave the data in the flex table, right, for a longer term usage, or if you want to now take that structure that you've discovered and that you've defined and possibly added value or determined what the value is of this data set, at which point you can move this data into a true Vertica table and build your long-term ETL processes around that other table.
Exactly. And again, I think when Tori and I, we sat down with one of the engineers that helped build this, and one of the things that he wanted to say is the benefit is that you can query it right away, and then you can decide what you want to do once you've explored it and figured out what's in there. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to show you, once we've materialized some of this information, we've defined some of this information, we're going to bring you through this whole process. We're going to take you through the commands you're going to use. We're going to do a live demo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just bringing in some basic JSON data. And this data is not anything special. I actually pulled it off a JSON website. So if you wanted to practice this, you can go to jasongenerator.com and look for it yourself. But it's really just some basic data to show you how you can bring this in. And JSON data is also often the social media data that your organization may be gathering. Then Tori is going to take the same process, but he's going to go a little bit further. He's bringing in some syslog network data, and he's going to show us how it works and how you can then materialize it and bring it into a tool like Tableau and really start analyzing it and utilizing it. So I think we're ready to start the demo.
Yeah, so Kate, just for reference, and for those folks on the phone, Tori's driving the demo, at least hands on the keyboard, and Kate will walk us through it. But just real quick, just to take a look at this JSON file. It's literally just a text file that's stored on the file system of Vertica server. And I just looked at the top 10 rows of it so you can kind of get a feeling for what this JSON structure looks like. We're dealing with people data effectively, picture data, looks like some account balance data here. So with that, I'm going to jump into VSQL.
All right, so the first thing that Tori's going to do from this VSQL prompt is he's going to create the flex table. He's going to call, you're going to create Vivid Demo. Yep, there he goes. Oh, he must have copied and pasted, didn't you? And really, this is the start. You create the table. Then you just copy the data in. So he's going to take this JSON data that you looked at before. He's going to copy it in. Notice he's using the JSON parser here. And that's key. So Vertica 7.0 comes with two parsers, the JSON parser and the delimited parser that we're talking about today. Now, there are some other parsers out. I know that there have been some posted on github.com. So if there's other types of data, you should check out the github.com/Vertica to see some of the other parsers. So go ahead and we're going to copy that data in. All right, and you'll notice that we have we got six pieces of data, I think 6 rows added in. And what we're going to do now is just do a basic select string, select statement, so we can kind of just see what's in there. So let's see what's in this data. We can look at some of the data and kind of get a sense of it. So if you look at this, you can see that, again, like we saw earlier, there's some address data, there's some age data, and so forth. So if we ran a select query and pulled out some of the columns, we could select the address, the age, the balance, and so forth, and really define some of that data. And now you can really look at it, and you can actually see what's in there. So again, what we have done is we created a table, we copied the data in, and now we can actually run a query against it. And you can actually look at the details of that data. From there, what we're going to do now is we're actually going to run what's called an explain plan in Vertica, and this will just allow you to see where is this data coming from. So go ahead and just put the word explain in front of that query, and you're going to be able to see where it's pulling this data.
Excuse me, Kate and Tori, this is Sumit. I think there is someone asked if the font size can be increased. Tori, on your screen.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback.
1 minute.
Appreciate it. We had this conversation ahead of time, and we thought we were big enough, but
yeah. So, don't scroll too far down the. Oh, there's the. Okay.
I'm gonna rerun the explain plan with the adjusted.
Okay, great. So what you can see is, if you notice, and can you just highlight that materialized piece right there under the access, the fourth line down from the access path? You can see what it's doing is it's pulling the data from the column vividdemo.raw. That's where this data is coming from. That's the key here, is that we're querying this from that column, the raw column. So again, what we get is the identity column and the raw column when we do this, but you can see that we can run queries against it and actually look at the data, try to discover what's in there. Okay, so what we're going to do next is, now that we've sort of looked at what's in there, we're now going to we're going to compute some of the flex table keys and build the view. Now, this is one of those helpers that comes with Vertica to help materialize some of this and look at it more closely. And so what we've done is we've added some structure around this unstructured data, and now we can actually select from the data keys to see the new structure. So we're just going to select star from the Vivid Demo keys, and we can actually see that we've kind of defined the about, the address, the age, the balance. We can see that. And then we can also look at, for example, the address column by going into the view that we created with that helper. So as we look at this, we're actually looking at the address information from the view. So we're actually now really able to look at that and see where the data is, see the data that's in there in the address column. And what we're really showing here is that you've just added some simple structure using these helper keys, and you can actually see that structure right in the system. So now what we're going to do, yeah.
Kate, the critical part here, and the thing that I want to really stress here is that we didn't have to have a knowledge of the data structure before. Granted, it came from JSON, so it was a self-describing structure. But we didn't have to have a knowledge of it. We didn't have to go through some effort to parse that on our own and to extract and load that data into a traditional database table. Vertica and the functions that we just looked at, the flex table, compute flex table keys and build a view, it did that for us. It looked at the data. It said, here's the columns that or the attributes from the data that came in, and let's create some columns for it. And then really leverage those columns in this view, as we saw here with the address field.
Right, and I think that's really the key of what we're talking about here is that literally we built a table, we copied data, we ran a few functions, and now we have structure to this data. And again, Vertica's functions are helping us do that. So that's really the key to all of this. And the other piece is that we didn't even have to do this piece here. We could have just kept querying that flex table if that was enough for us. Because again, that data that we have is in that raw column, and we can run queries against it. So that's really the key that we're trying to point out here. Okay, so next we are going to materialize some of the columns, the flex table columns, and here we're going to define 4. So we're just going to use 4 for the number of columns. Later, you're going to see that Tori's going to do a few more for his data, so that he can bring that forward into the Tableau piece a little bit better. So go ahead and take a look at that.
Tori, this is Sumit again. I'm sorry. There's a request to change a font color, if that's possible.
Is that possible?
Let's see what we can do.
Yeah, maybe change the
No, I don't think they get
something else. I mean,
yeah, I'm not familiar with how to do that. I usually use putty with a black background.
Yeah, I can go back. I'll run you through. So cancel here, and you select colors under window, few lines below. There you go. And you say default foreground. Yep. Modify. And
what are we looking for here?
I don't know if you can change yeah, probably, but
will green look good?
Or appear white, perhaps?
And then make the font black? What will that do?
Yeah, anything contrasting, right? You know.
Yeah,
is that
so
better?
That lighten the.
It looks brighter to me. I hope it solves the problem. Go ahead.
Okay, let us know if it doesn't, because this is important that the commands here get pushed through into the webinar session, because this is the key, right? I mean, this is the bulk of the intent here. So.
Okay, so the person who asked the question, Dalton, can you type on the chat window if it resolved your problem or not? Let's go ahead while we get the response.
Okay. So what we've done is we've defined 4 columns, and you can see that it's about, address, age, and balance. And we are looking at so we've used this materialized flex table columns command. Again, another function defines the columns for you within the flex table, and you can also look at, it's telling you down below that to get more details, you can run select star from vCatalog materials flex columns, so that you can see where this is, what this is all doing. And I think Tori is going to do that for us right now. Thank you. And you can actually look at the fact that these columns, So we've got our, you'll see that it's just in the public schema, it's in the table Vivid, and it's telling you that it's creating these columns. So what we're looking at here is that by running some very basic commands, we're really being able to put structure on this without a lot of effort from having to go in and dig deep and figure out the structure. We loaded the data, we looked at it, and then we gave it a little structure by just some simple functions. Now, what we're going to try now is we're actually going to run the query plan that we ran earlier, and we're going to look at where the data is coming from now that we've defined these columns. So if you can just run that query plan again, and let's see how that looks. And again, what we want to look at is that you can see that it's materializing the raw, but you're going to notice that they're up above the materialized, the projection is now the public Vivid demo. So it's a little bit more defined, and it's telling you the difference between where the data is pulling from. So before, it was just pulling the Vivid demo raw data. Now it's actually looking also at the columns within that projection about the address and so forth. So again, by defining these columns, we're actually giving it structure. It can still pull data if it needs to from the raw data file because it still exists in this table, but now you actually have some defined columns as well. Okay. All right. So
one of the things we can show here.
Oh yeah.
Kate, is take a look at the actual table structure. Right. Remember, initially we ran a command, create flex table Vivid demo. And when we initially did that, it created the first two columns, the identity column and the raw column that Kate walked through in her slides and walked through here. Similar to the explain plan, right? And really the explain plan is referencing these additional 4 columns that were materialized into that table. So you can see the structure and the actual application of the graphical representation that Kate walked through earlier.
Right. So the command that he ran is just a vSQL command that says, look at the table, Vivid demo, and it's showing you those columns. And again, just like any columns, you'll see that it's giving you some data types and so forth. But the benefit here is that we've run a few commands and we've added structure to this table. And that's really what we're trying to show you is how simple this is to create a table, load the data, query it, understand it, and add some structure to it. Okay, so I think that that gives you, so again, in this part of the demo, what we're trying to show you is generally how this works. What Tori's going to do is a similar process, but he's going to use the delimitated parser, and he's going to bring in some syslog network data and really show you how you can take this even further and really look at some, bringing this into other tools like Tableau. And he's just going to run a few commands to get to where he needs to be.
Yep. So I'm just taking a look at the data, Kate, the raw data as it came out. So the data that I'm going to work with is some networking data. It's syslog data that came out of a networking device. So this would be considered some of that machine data that in most organizations, syslog data and networking data gets logged by the networking systems itself, whether it's the actual routers or perhaps an enterprise monitoring system. But then after a relatively short period of time, because there's all this traffic coming through, after a relatively short period of time, in most organizations, this data gets flushed out. So it's captured for a short-term operational use, if it's actually referenced or utilized in that capacity, and then it's flushed out. It's dropped. It's no longer available, right? It's cleared from the systems. So I'm going to take this data, and it, again, just got generated, just syslog data from a Cisco ASDM interface, which is just a manual way that I extracted it. And we're just taking a look at this data. So the first line of the data really just gives a table name structure. Otherwise, these columns would come in as column 1, column 2, column 3. And you could move forward with that, and you could start to get an understanding of that with that capacity. But that's what my raw data looks like. So now if I drop back into VSQL, I'm going to create another flex table similar to Kate's. Though note that mine is going to be Vivid Demo 2. So there's my flex table. It got created. And again, if we take a look at the raw structure here of this table, right? So I'm just describing my new flex table called Vivid Demo 2. Right now, it's only got 2 columns in it, this identity and this raw, which, again, we've looked at a couple of different times here. My next step is going to be to copy in my data, and we're going to take a look at this a little bit in a little more detail. So I'm going to copy data. It's going to go into Vivid Demo 2, and it's going to come from this file that I just looked at. Okay. The parser that I'm leveraging is the fdelimited parser, which you can pass in and leverage any number of delimiters, right? So if it's a CSV file, you can use this parser. If it's delimited, in my case, with a pipe, we can do that as well. Or really any delimiter that you can define in there. So this data is going to get copied in, and we can see that I loaded a little over 1,000 rows of data, and that's the same number of lines that were in my log file that we looked at a minute ago. Let's see. So we created a flex table. We can take a look at this if we wanted to, but we're going to immediately jump into computing the flex table keys and building the view, just so we can take a look at that aspect as well, because we looked at it in a little more detail with Kate. So here we are. We're going to compute the flex table keys and build a view. There we go. So now we have this view. It's there. It's ready. Now if we wanted to select things from it, I'm going to select just 10 things. I don't want to, that's not what I copied. Sorry, I've got these commands in a different window, so I don't have to type them all out because it never seems to fail. So we're going to select everything from our Vivid Demo 2 view, right? This view that got created for us. And we're going to cap that at 10 just so we can see this data. And again, to show how simple it was to get the data loaded and for it to get some structure put around it. So we can see that we've got destination IP, we've got destination port, source IP, and we've got some time data here as well as messages. So we literally just took the data and created a view around it, right? Self-defining structure. The next thing we're going to do is materialize it, okay? And when we materialize it, really we're just adding those additional columns to that Vivid Demo 2 table. And in this case, I'm going to use 8 columns. I just picked 8 because I counted and there's 8, give or take. Kate, I believe, used a value of 4 here. This really just defines the number of columns that will have this materialization executed against it. So here we go. There we are. We did severity, date, description, destination, port, source IP, and syslog ID. If we take a look at the materialized columns table, we can see that, sure enough, there's our columns. There's the date that those columns were created, the status that they were. If we go back and we do another display on Vivid Demo 2, so we describe it, again, we can see that not only do we have our identity column and our raw column that we started with, but now we have severity, date, destination IP, destination port, source IP, and source port, and syslog ID. So that's all great, grand, wonderful. We've shown you now 2 different ways to get data into Vertica. But now what do we do with it, right? We, as a lot of cases, are administrators, and that's where our job effectively ends, or that's where our concern stops effectively, right? We got the data loaded. It's in there now. Some business analyst needs to go look at the data and make a determination whether or not it's beneficial or not. So for that aspect, we're going to use Tableau. So here I've got a Tableau workbook open. It's not yet connected to any data. For those that are familiar with Tableau, they're probably very familiar with what I'm going to do here. But I'm going to show you how easy it is to collect or to connect to this data and start to pull it out and start to utilize it and leverage it. So I'm going to connect to data, and I apologize. This portion, the font will be a little small until we actually get data on the page. And once we get data on the page, I can start to adjust the font size. So I'm going to connect to HP Vertica. I'm going to put in my server name, port 5443, the database on the server, which I know, and the credentials to connect to it. So as soon as I connect, we can see that I get a list of tables out here. we've got a number of things. We use this as a demonstration environment. So we've got demo data and we've got generic JSON data out here. But what we're really interested in should be down here. So here's the Vivid demo tables that Kate worked on in my Vivid demo 2. I'm going to go to my Vivid demo 2 view, though, and I'm going to leverage that. So I'm going to connect to that, and I'm going to connect live so that those queries get executed live against the system. And we can see right away that there is the same columns from the view that we have out here. So if we wanted to start to leverage this, say we want to look at some relationship between the destination IP and the source IP, we can drag that out there. Let's actually reverse this so it makes sense, at least in my head, from the left to the right. The source is contacting the destination IP in this case. And if we wanted to, we could get the destination port out here. And hopefully these are big enough to see. And then other things we can do, which really starts to add some visualization to this. And this is just generic Tableau. I'm going to take the destination port off. And what I'm going to do is actually put the destination IP back out here. However, I'm going to make this a count. Okay? So I start to get this visualization, if you will, so I can very quickly look at this data and say, okay, in this case, there's 49 occurrences of source IP 10.100.1.50 contacting this destination IP of 172.16.1.5 address. And we can start to see that. We can start to put visualization around that. We can start to look at that. And perhaps depending on the problem that I'm trying to solve as a business analyst, that may be beneficial. There's different ways that I, from a business analytics perspective or from a business analyst perspective, can slice and dice this data. All this data was collected on the same date, so the actual date isn't too interesting. But if we were to break this down also by time, we could start to see that how many times in a given second certain things were accessed. So this one jumps out at me 4 times in 1 second, right? Effectively, that this data or that this source contacted that destination. And this is just network analysis, effectively. But one of the things you can do with Tableau is get to this data and actually look and see the underlying data if it's not in the visualization itself. We can see that there was some UDP connections that all got torn down at the same time in this case. But that's the higher level use case, right, of enabling those business analysts or the business users or the non-DBAs of the world to really get access to this data, but then also minimize the overhead on the DBAs and on the sysadmins so that they don't have to go through this big and ugly ETL, extract, transform, and load process to get this data visible to users. Because once those users get the data, they can really start to look at it and determine if there's value or if there's not value. And there wasn't a lot of investment from a administration perspective to load the data just to make it available for usage. Okay, that effectively wraps up my portion of the demonstration. Sumit, have there been any other questions or anything else that have come in on the question and answer?
Yeah, so thank you for the demo, Kate and Tori. That was very good and insightful. We do have questions. We have one question, and that is there an application I need to download in order for this to work? I guess the question is whether FlexTable is an extra download or not.
So this is Kate, and the way that FlexZone works is with any of your licenses, you get 1 terabyte of FlexZone. And for those of you that are interested and maybe you don't have Vertica, we actually, on the Vertica.com website, you can actually go and download our Community Edition, which gets 1 terabyte of Vertica database, and it also gets you 1 terabyte of FlexZone. So this is a way that you can go and see, is this a useful tool for you? If you want to just try out some of this, syslog data information, or maybe you want to go pull in some machine information, anything that you want to see, is this going to be useful? You can actually use a Community Edition. If you're a Vertica customer, you already get 1 terabyte of FlexZone with your Vertica license if you have upgraded to 7.0.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that FlexZone and FlexTables were introduced in 7.0. So if you're still on 6X, Flex functionality won't be there. You have to upgrade to 7.
And when did we have the version 7 come in the market? Like that was last year, right?
It came on market in mid to late December.
Okay, so about 6 months.
Of 2013, yeah.
Great, thank you. We have another question. How would you verify that data you have copied, say from legacy system to FlexTable, is correct or not? If the data in the legacy system is stored in a text file or comma delimited, how would you check if the data got loaded into correct columns in Vertica?
How do you verify that the data got loaded into correct columns? So there's a couple different aspects here. If it's a CSV import or if it's a delimited file import, depending on the delimited parser will effectively parse and place those into columns. If your input file or the file leveraged during the copy statement has the first row, that first row you can put column names in there. So if we jump back to here and we drop out just real quick, I can take a look at this. So here's the very first row of my raw text file, right? So this is just a delimited file, and there's a header row here of column names, effectively, and these column names are respected by that delimited parser, and they get passed through into the flex table. If you don't have this first column or first row of data that is self-describing, if you will, Vertica will just assign I'm going to say a random, but it's not really all that random. The data will get split into column 1 will have the first value, column 2 will have the second value, column 3 will have the third value. So at least you can start to get some structure and you can start to get an understanding about that. So that's how that works.
Okay. Next question. How does this software figure out the optimal data type for a particular column?
So this is Kate. In terms of the raw column, actually, Tori, can you go back to look at the details of the flex table? Yep, hold on one second. Okay, so if you look at this, the raw column, you'll notice is a long var binary, forget what that is, 130,000. So it's a very long file so that your column, because remember, you're putting all the data into one column. So when you load a flex table, your data will be put into that data type. When it's materializing the column, so below here, it's going to choose probably a varchar just because that's a sort of base data type. One of the things that you might decide to do once you look at that is say, well, this is really integer data and I'll get better analytics from that. But yeah, it's just going to use basic varchar because that's a basic type. You'll notice, I believe it's the sizing is changing a little, probably based on the actual data itself. But again, remember that your raw file will always be that long var binary because that's giving it the ability to be that big. And the other thing to keep in mind is that if you keep all the data in that and never actually materialize any of this, you're going to have to, your queries will take a little bit more overhead because of that data type. So materializing some of these columns like this will actually help the query efficiency and so forth.
In this case, this particular column is literally a single integer column in the data source, but it did get mapped to a varchar 20, right? So the value and severity is going to be a single character, but it is stored in a varchar 20. So. Okay.
So you could do your conversion there. One last question. I guess we got a couple more questions. What about data that is not delimited?
Data that is not delimited. So out of the box, Vertica supports and FlexTable support 2 types of data coming in, delimited data and JSON data. So if you can put a JSON structure around it, you can leverage that as well. Non-delimited data. Kate, do you have suggestions for that?
Yeah. So I know that the engineers are obviously working on some other parsers. For some of our specific customers, they may have created some parsers. And so in some cases, if you go out, as I was saying, to github.com/Vertica, you may actually find some of these parsers. They've posted them if they've created them. And other users may have created some other parsers. So that would be the first thing. The other thing is that you can define your own parsers within Vertica. So that may be another way to try to deal with this. There are more parsers coming out in future versions, but for now, what we support is the JSON and the delimited. If you need other types of data, you may check the GitHub site or consider trying to build your own parsers.
Okay, so that kind of answered the next question, which is there an XML parser out there yet or not? I guess might be on GitHub, right?
GitHub, especially for the XML, yeah.
Okay. We have a general Vertica question, not tied with flex table or unstructured data. Is that what's the Vertica management / monitoring GUI tool? Like, do we have anything that can allow us to look into the database, the basic structure, performance, etc.? I guess we should be able to do queries. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Kate.
Vertica comes with Management Console, which is a GUI system, and it will monitor things like what's going on with your node system, what's going on with the queries that are going on in your system. It will tell you your disk space, your CPU usage, your memory usage. It'll graph it all out for you. With 7.0, the Management Console, you can now run the Database Designer, which is a way to build a design around your database to build your projections. You can do that in Management Console. You can start and stop the database there. So that will actually that will monitor, and you can do it as a whole system. You can also dig deeper and look at it by node.
Okay, thank you for that. At this point, I do not see any more questions. Feel free to ask any more questions if we have any. And Tori or Kate, I'll let you run through the review slide.
Kate, you want this, or you want me to take it?
Oh, you can go for it.
So in summary, we looked at creating flex tables, right, and how simplistic that can be. We looked at bringing in that semi-structured data. We looked at querying that data, materializing the data, and then, of course, enabling our business analysts or the non-administrators, if you will, through Tableau to query that data and to start to analyze it on their end to determine if there is that business value. Because remember, that's really the big key here is you've got a slew of data out there. You don't particularly know what's in it. It's dark to you. You collect it, you drop it off the storage system. So now let's actually take a look at it and start to look and see if it would be beneficial. And enabling business analysts to do that is going to greatly relieve the administration of the data itself. Submit, if there's no other questions, we could probably wrap it up.
Actually, we do have one question that just popped up. In the command where they were materializing the data, they each chose a number of columns. For example, Kate chose 4 columns. Does that just pull the first 4 columns in the structure? What if you wanted to pull second but not consecutive ordered columns?
That is a good question that I personally don't know how it determines the number of columns or which columns to materialize. Kate, do you know that?
I believe it is like they suggested, pulling the first 4 columns. I have not tried to say, okay, I want columns 2, 6, and 8. Using maybe a comma or something. Do we want to try to run that command and see if we can do that?
Yeah, I can dig back.
Again, please be aware that we're experimenting. But maybe just try 1 and comma 3 and see if that works. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, because this is what I was worried about. The function itself is expecting 2 parameters, and we passed it 3 with the extra column. That's a good question. We should, Kate, circle with folks on the Vertica side and see if we can't get some determination or identification. Because we'll have contact info for the people who ask those questions, so we could circle with them.
Absolutely, and we can, when James gets back from being on the cliff in Colorado, we can check in with him. Our engineer is actually hiking this week, so.
Sure, and there's probably, you could write your own mapper function to, put any kind of structure around these things, I would guess, if you want to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, if you break this down, Sumit, you can really see that the column type here is really just leveraging a map lookup. So
Correct.
It's really just doing a map lookup based upon the column that's of interest for that particular row, or column, sorry, and then mapping that into a data type, right? So at the end of the day, that's how it's working. So if you wanted to supplement the flex table with additional columns that you defined, that's possible as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, I'm not seeing any more questions, so we will conclude it, but before that, we have to thank all the audiences for coming in and spending an entire hour with us. We really appreciate your time. Hopefully, we picked up something on this session about unstructured data, how to mine dark data, and how to put a structure around it and do query and all the way to visualization. I would like to thank Kate Fontanella and Tori for their presentations and work in the demo, and also big thanks to you, Tori, for running the demo almost flawlessly. And finally, I'd like to remind all of the audience that this session is being recorded. So I believe within a few hours, you should be able to watch the archive of this session as well as the whole presentation deck on the Vivid website. Do join us for our next session when we have one on Big Data SIG, and also look out for Vivid website for other interest groups, including security and cloud and all other things. So with that, this is Sumit Sengupta. I will conclude this session. Thank you.